Welcome into the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast. I'm Bradley Stalder at FF Stalder, and tonight Jason Katz, better known as Katz from PFN, is gonna talk with me tonight about some of the NFL team needs. But before we get into all of that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't downloaded Underdog Fantasy, what are you waiting for? They've got a slick mobile app, and you can use the promo code FFF for 100% first time deposit match up to $100. That's right. It's like a free tank of gas in this economy. Definitely want to take advantage of this promo code FFF on Underdog Fantasy. You can join me. You can join so many other players on Underdog drafting against each other in best ball tournaments, such as the Super Flex tournament, which I posted plenty of videos of me drafting and bringing on guests as well, doing drafts, but also we're going to have Best Ball Mania. There's a freshman sophomore draft right out there right now. So if you haven't downloaded Underdog Fantasy, make sure you do and use the promo code FFF for a first time deposit match, 100% match up to $100.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast, powered by Underdog Fantasy and presented by Fantasy Data, home to some of the industry's most accurate rankings.
All right, Katz, you made it. It's been in the works for a long time. You coming on the podcast and talking with me about these exciting moves in free agency. Thanks for making it tonight.
I'm happy to be here. When we first discussed me appearing on the show, there was no free agency. Tom Brady was still retired. It was a whole different world.
It was a whole different world. Tyreek Hill was still on the Chiefs. Devontae Adams still on the Packers. I don't even know what's going to be different tomorrow. This has been a whirlwind free agency time period, and a lot has happened that has shifted the landscapes, I think, for a lot of teams. But let's get into, we're going to break it down by division. We'll start with the AFC East. In Buffalo, we're going to talk about some of the things they've done this offseason, which really hasn't been very much from the fantasy perspective. They have signed Jamison Crowder, but they've lost Manny Sanders and Cole Beasley to free agency. Sanders might retire. Cole Beasley was injured at the end of last season, rib injuries. I don't know if he's going to be back, but Gabriel Davis stepped up in a big way in the playoffs, despite the Bills losing. I'm still not convinced that the Bills have like their number 2 wide receiver behind Stephon Diggs, who they extended this offseason. They did sign Jamison Crowder. Katz, what is your outlook for this Buffalo offense? What do they still need?
I really don't think they necessarily need anything. I actually like the signing of Jamison Crowder. I think he's going to be their primary slot receiver. I'm a fan of Isaiah McKenzie, but unfortunately, despite the Bills extending him, I think it's one of those things where he's not going to be this fantasy superstar that we saw him be. I think it was week 16 last year. He was a wide receiver 1. It was a monster game. But that's just not going to be consistently what he is. They're just going to use him in a rotational role. He'll have more work this year than he had last season. But I really think Jamison Crowder is the guy this year. In 2020, remember, 31-year-old Cole Beasley averaged 13.5 fantasy points per game. He was a low wide receiver 3. I think Crowder could be that. Does that mean Gabriel Davis is the wide receiver 2 there? I think so, but it may just be Diggs is the target hog, and I think Crowder would be second in that team in targets.
Crowder has struggled to stay healthy, though, and we've seen the ceiling for Isaiah McKenzie. Over his last 17 games, there have been 2 instances where McKenzie's been a top 7 weekly finish at wide receiver. So if he's given the opportunity, we've seen Josh Allen give him the targets, but, it's Jamison Crowder he's had, I think since 2015, like a 20% target share every season except once. So like he's going to command targets if he's on the field. But I think another question for the Buffalo Bills is their running back situation. At the end of the year, Devin Singletary was the lead back, and Zach Moss was even inactive for some of these games throughout the season. Do you think that's going to be a priority for them? They didn't address it in free agency, but could they address it in the draft?
I've seen a lot of reports out there that the Bills are looking into drafting a running back or acquiring another running back. And we saw them almost do it. They signed J.D. McKissick until he changed his mind the next day and went back to Washington. So they clearly want to address the position. They know Zach Moss is not the answer. I've been a big opponent of Zach Moss since he was drafted. I just never thought he was all that good. We saw Matt Breida flash for a moment, but he's not really going to matter. At this point, it does appear to be Singletary's backfield, and I think they can do just fine with that. I'd like to see them draft a running back on day 3 as a complementary piece, but I'm definitely concerned, especially as somebody who likes Singletary for this season, at least right now, that they may draft someone on day 2 to really split that backfield with Singletary.
I mean, I don't think Duke Johnson's going to be the answer, but at least he was an interesting player a few years ago. I don't know if that's quite going to be, satisfying the Buffalo Bills backfield in what they need. We'll move on to Miami. First, they did sign Chase Edmonds. He was the first running back signed out of free agency. They traded for Tyreek Hill. They traded away Devontae Parker. This offense is probably going to look a lot different now that Will Fuller is also gone. What do you think the biggest need of the Miami Dolphins offense is right now?
I actually don't see much. This all comes down to whether Tua can actually take a step forward this season, which, I mean, if we saw what Tyreek Hill did for Alex Smith, there is precedent for him making a quarterback that's perceived as like a game manager, check down type artist into somebody that excels in downfield passing. If we see that advancement from Tua, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL right now, and they have Mostert and Edmonds as a nice 1-2 punch for as long as Mostert is on the field, maybe a couple quarters if they're lucky. And this offense just, it could be very good. I don't really see what they necessarily need besides, I guess, maybe drafting another offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, Raheem Mostert coming off the season-ending Week 1 injury for San Francisco, brought over by why am I blanking?
Mike McDaniel.
McDaniels. The name was escaping me for just a second. Brought over from San Francisco. He's 29.
Yeah.
He's 29, and I know he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires, and he's always been an explosive back, but that's still old for a running back.
I just don't see Mike McDaniel bringing over Mostert for any reason other than to not push him as the feature back, but I really do believe he's the guy to be in that tandem with Edmonds, at least for as long as he can stay healthy.
We'll keep in the division, move to New England, where the Patriots were not very active in free agency. They were very active last year, signing Nelson Aguilar, signing Kendrick Bourne, signing Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. But this year, the big move during the free agency period was not a free agent move. It was trading for Devontae Parker. Parker, not known for his separation, but he's commanding a 20+% target share. Does he plug in as the number 2 behind Jacoby Myers, or is there now a competition for that number 1 wide receiver role in New England?
I have an interesting relationship with Devontae Parker because I was never really a fan of his. And I believe that the Dolphins were going to let him go, especially once they traded for Tyreek Hill. But I like this move really for both teams. Parker is immediately the best wide receiver on the Patriots. Now, that's not necessarily a ringing endorsement of Parker. It more speaks to, like you said, the guys that they already had in Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. He's better than those guys. The concern is, what would a 20% target share for Parker look like in New England? Because like you said, that's about what we can probably expect from him. But even if he sees a 25% target share, which feels very high, we're looking at around maybe 130 targets. In a Patriots offense that last year ran the ball 47.8% of the time, 7th highest rate in the league, I think the floor and the ceiling are both pretty low for Parker, especially on a weekly basis.
Well, you touched on the running game. The Patriots did re-sign James White, who was a top 24 weekly finisher the 2 weeks he was active before the hip injury. What kind of a role do you think James White has in this Patriots offense now that we've seen what Ramondre Stevenson can bring to the table and the touchdown maker that is Damian Harris in the backfield as well.
It's interesting because there was a game last season where Ramondre Stevenson unexpectedly saw like a bunch of targets. I'm going to pull it up right now because I want to see what it was. Yeah, he had 5 targets in a game, just 1 week, and that was just a complete anomaly. He never had more than 2 targets in any other game, though. So I really think that he's more of the backup for Damian Harris. It's possible they work them in tandem, but I really think it's just going to be Harris is the guy, and Stevenson will get a couple carries here and there. White should get his receiving back role back. Even at 30 years old, we've seen that pass-catching running backs can remain effective later in their careers. Grinders are typically done when they get to their late 20s, but receiving backs, David Johnson, J.D. McKissick, these guys, 28, 29, 30 years old, not what they were in their younger years, but still can be effective because they're not taking as much punishment in the receiving role. I think we can see White return to not obviously the guy he was with Brady, but he can definitely see somewhere in that 60 to 70 target range. What's that worth in fantasy? I'm not sure with Mac Jones, but Mac Jones isn't exactly the most mobile quarterback in the world, more mobile than Brady, but not exactly a
that's not saying much.
Right. So White could have some fantasy relevance maybe as an RB3 in PPR leagues.
Well, right now he's being drafted as RB 67 on Underdog Fantasy. So I think he's one of the biggest values at running back. Like you can take him. His ADP is pick 231 out of 240. So he's going the last round. I think he's worth a last round stab or second last round stab in best ball tournaments if you're drafting them right now. And we'll finish off the AFC East with the New York Jets. So they signed Uzama, they signed Conklin, they re-signed Berrios. They've made pushes reportedly this offseason to draft to either draft or trade for an alpha wide receiver. They were in the mix for a while there for Tyreek Hill before he ended up going to Miami. Aside from the elite wide receiver, are there any other needs that the Jets have? Berrios, pegs in the slot. You've got Corey Davis out wide. You've got Elijah Moore coming back off injury. Like, what are the biggest needs for the Jets still?
I still think there's a chance they draft a running back. I know that I don't know if you do, but I like Michael Carter. I think he's a capable running back, but he was a 4th round pick. And as we've seen with day 3 picks and UDFAs, they just don't get any sort of leash, no matter how well they perform. We've seen guys like Philip Lindsay post back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and then that's it, he's gone. We saw James Robinson perform as a top 5 running back, at least from a fantasy perspective, and then the Jaguars go and draft Travis Etienne in the 1st round the following season. NFL teams just disrespect these later drafted running backs. Carter is only 23 years old. He played well down the stretch. He was used as a feature back last season, but there's still a very good chance that they draft someone else. If it's on day 2, even in the 3rd round, that's a concern. I'm hoping that because they re-signed Tevin Coleman, that's kind of their message that, hey, we'll use him as this competent, reliable backup, but Carter's still the guy. But yeah, there's still a chance that Carter's value could take a hit with a day 3 pick.
I think Carter's one of the most fragile running back values right now. Like, the offense isn't great, so you're depending upon volume for Michael Carter, and if he loses that volume, boom, you're dust. And you mentioned the draft capital. Time and again, we've seen it. So like the later rounds or UDFAs just be replaced or plucked or poof, they're gone. So I think that's a vulnerable spot, but I'm also interested in what the Jets would do with 3 not X wide receivers, but like we saw Elijah Moore primarily play out wide last year, and he was phenomenal, especially as a rookie. And Corey Davis commands a 20+% target share. Braxton Berrios looked good. So I'm wondering why the Jets are looking like, would they move on from Corey Davis? I'm not sure if that would be able to happen.
When you first mentioned the Jets going after an elite wide receiver, I had the same exact thoughts. I don't know why they feel they need one. They've been linked to guys like Drake London. I think there was talk of them taking him with their first pick, but I don't see the need for it. I mean, are we sure Elijah Moore can't be a wide receiver 1? He's 5'9", 178. And I know that their play style may not be the same, but Deontay Johnson, for example, 5'10", 183. I think Deontay Johnson is a legit wide receiver 1. Why can't Elijah Moore emerge into that guy? He, like you said, he played well, especially over the second half of last season. He had that game against Miami, 141 receiving yards. He had another game with 84 receiving yards. So this was a guy who had 2 games with double-digit targets. I think he proved enough as a rookie that he should get a chance to be that wide receiver 1. And like you said, are they just going to disregard Corey Davis? They re-signed Braxton Berrios. He should be their slot guy. Where is this rookie potentially going to play?
It beats me. Elijah Moore in his rookie season. This was crazy. I thought this was absolutely crazy. There were only 15 players with a higher in the NFL, 15 wide receivers with a higher top 10 wide receiver weekly finish rate than Elijah Moore. He had a number 1 weekly finish, number 3 weekly finish, and a 9 weekly finish, in addition to a 25, 40, and 21 weekly finish, 26 as well. So he played exceptional. So I love the Deontay Johnson thought that he could be a wide receiver 1, and I don't think you want to be selling on Elijah Moore at all this offseason. If anything, he's probably undervalued, even if you're paying a premium in Dynasty. Okay, we'll shift to the AFC North. You're good. AFC North. We'll start with the Baltimore Ravens. And recently, they've been linked to Melvin Gordon. I don't think he's officially signed, right?
No, he has not been signed. It's just been rumors that they were talking to him. They hosted him for a visit. I think that's all it's been so far.
But I think that is a smoke signal that there are legitimate concerns about J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and their recovery from the ACL injuries they suffered in the preseason last year, in like consecutive weeks too. It was kind of eerie and odd. But this signals to me that the Baltimore Ravens view the first and second down running back as a big time need, that you're going after a veteran like Melvin Gordon, who time and again has proven that he's a reliable player just when you think he's dust. His player profiler comp, as funny as it is Frank Gore, who like never went away. So like he played to like 36 and he just didn't like stop producing. But looking at all the other positions, Lamar Jackson's set, you don't have questions at quarterback. Rashad Bateman had a few flash moments. Marquise Brown has a 26+% target share each of the last 2 seasons. We saw a level up in Mark Andrews. Maybe they attack the wide receiver 3 position. But other than that, like I think that the running back, they're communicating that they have a need there.
Yeah, I was very surprised by that because I don't really see it. Now, I do think Melvin Gordon is still capable of being an early down back. He's a competent pass catcher, always has been. The Broncos certainly don't necessarily need him because we know how good Javonte Williams was in his 1 start last season. But Gordon said himself that the reason he hasn't signed with Denver yet is he wants a chance at being a lead runner. And we have precedent of this in Baltimore when they signed Mark Ingram. I think it was 2019, and Ingram was RB1 that season. If they sign Melvin Gordon, I do believe it would be to make him their primary back. And that's, like you said, concerning for Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I don't know why they feel they can't use these two in a tandem. Perhaps there's some concerns with the injuries that we don't know about, both coming off late preseason ACL tears. But yeah, Melvin Gordon, if he did sign in Baltimore, I think he'd be a pretty good value.
We'll move to the Cincinnati Bengals. They signed Hayden Hurst to replace CJ Uzomah. Their wide receiver core is set for the next couple of years. Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Joe Mixon signed a contract extension not too long ago. But I think it's the backup running back or third down back that could use some more security. Chris Evans and Samaje Perine just don't inspire confidence if Joe Mixon goes down with injury again, which we've seen Mixon have injuries that have kept him out for some time. So are there any other concerns you have about the Cincinnati Bengals? They beefed up the offensive line this offseason. I think they're ready to take a step forward and actually win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I mean, every team could always improve in certain areas, but I really think the Bengals are a complete team. They have what I think is the best wide receiver duo in the NFL. They have an excellent slot receiver in Tyler Boyd. They have, I think, a top 5 to 8 running back in terms of real life talent. The third down back is an issue, but I think more of the issue is just leave Mixon on the field. Just play Mixon until he's tired. then rest him, sure. But Mixon can be a third down back. Why do they feel the need to use guys like Chris Evans and Samaje Perine? No disrespect to them. I think that they're worthy of being NFL players. But why are we taking Joe Mixon off the field?
Probably the injuries, probably just to regulate Mixon. Although we have seen him handle large, target shares and large rush shares before. So, he's not getting any younger. He is getting into that apex running back. Like he's on the second contract, all of that. But still, I think that the Bengals, they don't have a lot of holes now going into 2022.
All these picks in the offensive line.
All these picks in the rookie draft are going to be luxury picks, I think.
We're good.
Okay. The Cleveland Browns, a lot has happened this offseason with the Browns. They traded for Deshaun Watson. They traded for Amari Cooper. They haven't traded Baker Mayfield yet. I've talked about the Deshaun Watson situation with a variety of different guests. I even brought Drew Davenport on of Football Guys, and we chatted about the moral and legal implications and all of that for Deshaun Watson. But from a fantasy perspective, I think the Browns are still in great need of a number 2 and number 3 wide receiver. I'm not convinced that Donovan Peoples-Jones has the it. I'm sorry. And also Anthony Schwartz has, I think, some natural talent, but I don't know if he's like a good enough football player to get on the field. So, what do you think about the Browns? Are they actually going to go out and re-sign Jarvis Landry if they unceremoniously cut him?
I think that he would instantly be the second best wide receiver on their team. I was afraid that we might have to do battle over Donovan Peoples-Jones because there are so many people out there that believe in him, and I just don't get it. I think he's a glorified Marquez Valdez-Scantling in that vein. He's a downfield deep threat. He'll splash for a 70-yard touchdown every so often. He'll give you 3 to 4 games of high-level production because of a long touchdown, and he'll disappear for the rest of them, and you'll have no idea when those games are. He's a wide receiver rotational 3-4 at best in the NFL. Anthony Schwartz, I'm sorry, 135 receiving yards as a rookie. That is largely a death knell for the future success of any sort of player, any sort of wide receiver. Typically, you got to get to at least like 350 receiving yards to have a chance to emerge into a productive NFL player. Schwartz did not get there. I know that we can make excuses, but this is what the data has indicated over the years. They definitely need a wide receiver too. If it's not Jarvis Landry, there's still a couple guys out there they could sign. Will Fuller's still out there. I know that he doesn't really particularly like to play football, but when he does, especially with Watson.
Well, his finger didn't want to play football.
He says that, and I know that there are reports that it was completely shattered, but we're talking about a guy that broke his finger, in like week 5 or 6? He missed the rest of the season. Really? I mean, he also missed week 1 of last year due to a suspension. He came back and played 1 game and then took another game off, or maybe it was reversed because he was dealing with something. I'm just not sure if Will Fuller is all that into football, which leaves who? I guess maybe they draft somebody. But yeah, they can't go into the season.
Oh, with what first-round pick?
Right, because they traded it away.
So you mentioned Donovan Peoples-Jones versus Marquez Valdez-Scantling. That's an interesting comp because over their last 17 games, Peoples-Jones actually has a higher 67th percentile weekly finish than MVS. But MVS, his 90th percentile outcome is wide receiver 10 compared to Peoples-Jones wide receiver 25. Like in the top 10% hit rate, MVS does hit. But yeah, I think they just don't have good hands. They're downfield threats. They don't have great hands. And, if you're looking for MVS to be your answer as your wide receiver 2 or Donovan Peoples-Jones to be your answer at wide receiver 2, your team is in a lot of trouble. So that is, I think, a big need for the Browns. The Steelers will finish up the AFC North. The Steelers, their biggest need, I think, is the cute quarterback of the future.
Yeah.
Mitchell Trubisky is the answer right now. And we saw flashes of brilliance and we saw a lot of bad from Trubisky the last time he was the starter. And we could point out and say, it was Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy's an idiot. Matt Nagy this, blah, 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 the coaching staff. But back in 2018, Mitchell Trubisky was the quarterback 11 in fantasy points per game. He was able to make it happen. And I think that the Steelers have a lot more offensive weapons. They've got Deontay Johnson. They've got Claypool. They've got Freiermuth. They've got Najee Harris. So there could be things that happen, but there's no way that Tomlin looks at this situation and says, yes, I am confident that Mitchell Trubisky is our answer. I wonder if a player like Desmond Ridder might be a good fit in Pittsburgh.
I'm reluctant to proclaim that any team is going to find their quarterback of the future in this year's draft class. I'm sorry, but I'm getting really, really strong 2013 vibes from this quarterback class. If you recall, that was the year that EJ Manuel was the first quarterback off the board. And I don't have the draft class in front of me, but I don't think that there is any quarterback from that class still in the NFL that's anything more than just a backup. Trubisky, like you said, flashes of brilliance. He had that stretch during 2018 where he was the quarterback 1, quarterback 5, quarterback 2, and quarterback 8 over a 4-week span. And then he was the quarterback 2 again 2 weeks later. So he has shown he has this high level upside. And let's be real here. At least from a fantasy perspective, there's no way he could be worse for this offense than Ben Roethlisberger was last season. I mean, it was a running joke for me and my friends that, 3rd and 2, time for a typical Big Ben 1-yard check down to Najee Harris. I've never seen a quarterback throw more passes at the line of scrimmage when he needed 2 or 3 yards than Ben Roethlisberger last season. They definitely need the quarterback of the future. Is it Trubisky? Probably not, but he can keep them afloat this season. We saw Mike Tomlin make the playoffs with Devlin Hodges at quarterback.
The Duck himself.
The Duck himself, yes. But I definitely like the weapons that the Steelers have, and I hope that Trubisky can work with them and keep them all afloat from a fantasy perspective.
I also think a 2nd round or 3rd round slot receiver would be a real nice addition. They lost Ray McLeod and they lost Juju Smith-Schuster, both slot receivers. I think they're set on the outside. So getting someone like, I don't know, a former Chicago Bear to play in the slot. Anthony Miller is currently on the Steelers.
Oh my God. And there's another one. I remember people talking him up, and I'm just looking, I'm like, what do you see in this guy? I mean, I'm not sure he's even an NFL talent, an NFL caliber player at all at any level. I mean, he should be playing this Saturday.
So, yeah, I agree with you. There are a lot of questions about the quarterback class. I don't know if they're going to get the answer here. But if Pittsburgh is bad, they're going to be picking in the top yet again, and the 2023 class is looking a lot better. Let's flip to the AFC South and kick it off with the Houston Texans. There's a lot of needs that the Texans have, but they signed Marlon Mack and they extended Brandon Cooks, so good for them, right? I mean,
I like Marlon Mack. I've been a fan of Mack ever since that he proved himself with the Colts. He had 2 seasons, 2018, 14.8 points per game, 2019, 12.8 points per game. Not superstar numbers, but he's a capable running back. I know that running back is technically a position of need for them, but you don't build from the running back up. We saw a team in New York try to do that, and they've been is the worst team in the NFL over that span. It's not Saquon Barkley's fault, but he certainly didn't do anything to make them better because, well, he plays running back. So the Texans are fine with Mack. They need to find out if Davis Mills is their quarterback of the future. Probably not, but I mean, he showed a couple flashes last season. They need a wide receiver 2. They may need a wide receiver 1 because don't look now, but Brandon Cooks is getting up there in age.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about Davis Mills. He had a higher top 10 quarterback weekly finish last year than Ryan Tannehill. So, if that tells you either how bad Tannehill was, I don't know if it tells you how good Mills was, but Tannehill was pretty bad last year. The reality is, though, that there are a lot of holes to fill. Brevin Jordan might be stepping up for them at tight end. There's a lot of might be's on this offense. Like Marlon Mack might be the answer. Rex Burkhead, probably not the answer, but he's still going to get in on the action. He was signed to an extension like in the middle of last season. It was bizarre. Like, why are you giving a 31-year-old beautiful bald-headed running back
Thank you.
an extension? It just doesn't make sense. But the Texans, yeah, they definitely need. Once again, I'm not sure if Nico Collins can step up into the wide receiver 2 spot. There are holes. There are holes that they need to fill, and lots of them.
Yeah, the Texans need to they just need to approach it from draft the best players you can, just at any position. There's too many holes to start trying to plug them.
Or
You
trade
do that,
down a
you
little
have
bit.
Yeah, I mean that's been the strategy for many of the best drafters over the years. Is if you don't have a specific hole you need to fill to like just complete your roster, just accumulate the best players. NFL teams historically, nobody is that good at drafting. The best teams at drafting are the ones that just have the most opportunity to succeed. How do you do that? Get more picks, especially in the second and third round.
Definitely. All right, so we'll see if Houston can trade down, get some more picks. They've already got the Cleveland Browns first round pick for like the next 3 years. So that should hopefully help. The Colts traded for Matt Ryan this offseason, but that was their big move. They saw Jack Doyle retire, so they might need some help at tight end, but who's going to play wide receiver behind Michael Pittman now that Zach Pascal is gone? Is it going to be Paris Campbell?
I mean, they can try to make it Paris Campbell, but Paris Campbell refuses to let it be Paris Campbell. He's been in the NFL now 3 years, and we mentioned Devontae Parker earlier and Corey Davis, two guys that had late career breakouts, but typically it doesn't happen. Yes, it's due to injury, but we're talking about a player with 360 career receiving yards in 3 seasons. He's played a grand total of 15 games. He could have played 49 games. At this point, I'm just not banking on Paris Campbell being healthy. T.Y. Hilton, what is he, 32, 33 years old? He's been mulling retirement. Maybe he comes back, but the fact that the Colts haven't brought him back yet suggests that they're ready to move on. Even if he is back, he's just a rotational wide receiver 3-4 at this point in his career. He's not going to make any sort of difference. They need to draft a wide receiver.
That's been the theme of our talk so far. A lot of wide receivers need to be drafted. And good thing we have at least depth at the wide receiver position in this rookie class. I don't think there's going to be any Jamar Chases based on what I've been reading and seeing and evaluating. But could there be a few Demaryius Thomases? Possibly.
We have the exact same opinion on this wide receiver class. I see a class with a lot of players that will be in the NFL for the next decade, and that will be starting caliber receivers, but I don't see that many high-end wide receiver ones. But that's perfectly fine. There are plenty of teams that could use Z receivers and then slot receivers, and this class has plenty of them.
All right. Well, speaking of a player who plays all over the place, Christian Kirk, slot receiver, outside receiver, we're not sure what he's going to play on Jacksonville because Zay Jones is also there. Also, Laviska Shenault, also slot tight end Evan Ingram signed. What is the biggest need for the Jaguars now that they spent a record amount in free agency to support Trevor Lawrence and new head coach Doug Peterson?
Their need is just playmakers, difference makers, superstars. They remind me of like that fantasy roster where everyone, it's like in an auction where you just draft a bunch of players that in snake drafts would go in like the 4th and 5th round. And you have this super deep team with a bunch of really good players, but nobody that's going to win you a matchup. Nobody that's going to put up that 30, 40-point week on occasion to be that difference maker. That's what the Jaguars have. They got Christian Kirk. He's good. They have Zay Jones. He's fine. They have Evan Ingram. He's fine. Marvin Jones. Fine. All these guys, they're fine. Where are the superstars? Where are the guys that are going to help elevate Trevor Lawrence? Maybe he's got to elevate these guys. We're not sure. We have to see it. I'm more willing to give Lawrence a mulligan on playing with the worst head coach in the history of the NFL. And Doug Peterson, Super Bowl winning head coach. Team's going to improve, but they really should just focus on the draft, on drafting the best players, similar to the Texans. Just draft the best players you can, guys that could potentially be difference makers.
How concerned are you about the injuries to the running back position for the Jaguars? The James Robinson late season Achilles tear and Travis Etienne. There have been mixed reports about Etienne and his progress that we haven't heard a lot. So are you concerned about the ambiguity and the dead silence from there? Or are we just rolling with it? Etienne's just going to be fine. He's one of the values. He's going off at about running back 22 right now in best ball drafts.
If Etienne is healthy, then I definitely like him this season. I think that he's going to be healthy before James Robinson, which means he's going to have a chance to integrate himself into Doug Peterson's new offense before Robinson, while Robinson's still recovering from his Achilles tear. We've seen Cam Akers come back in 5.5 months from an Achilles tear. Robinson should be ready to go for week 1, but to what extent? He wasn't the most explosive player to begin with, and we saw Cam Akers. He couldn't explode at all. Now, I do think that was due to the quick turnaround in the recovery, but Robinson is not going to come into the season and just storm out of the gates. So Etienne should be the starter there. But like you said, a bit of mixed reports. Etienne himself said he could have played toward the end of last season, but didn't because obviously they weren't going anywhere. But at the same time, he said...
Well, and they had the best head coach in the NFL, right?
Right. They said he said he was at about 80 to 85%, and this was in February, and that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear, even if it's a lie, you want to hear running backs saying that they're progressing well and they're ahead of schedule and they're doing great. I do think he'll be 100%, but foot injuries, they have a higher risk of recurrence, especially a Lisfranc fracture. I was kind of a wait and see approach. It's only April. There's still plenty of time. Doug Peterson said he expects Etienne to be there for OTAs. So I'm cautiously optimistic that he'll be ready to go when the season starts. And he has real low RB1 upside.
To finish off the division, Tennessee Titans traded for Robert Woods. They signed Austin Hooper. They let Julio Jones go. What are the biggest needs for the Titans? They saw Derrick Henry go out last year. They lost Deonta Foreman to free agency to the Carolina Panthers. Is it finding that backup running back to Derrick Henry? Is it tight end depth behind Austin Hooper? Is it wide receivers? Like what is it that the Tennessee Titans need the most?
I don't think that there's much they need. They brought over Robert Woods, and he expects to be ready to go week 1. A.J. Brown and Robert Woods are a fine wide receiver duo. They could maybe use a wide receiver 3, but it's not super important for a team that doesn't really run 3 receiver sets all too often. As for a backup running back, they didn't have one last year. They signed Deontay Foreman and Dontrell Hilliard off the street, and they performed capable in place of an injured Derrick Henry. If Henry gets hurt, they can just do that again. There's always running backs you can find. The real answer, we alluded to it earlier, or you did at least, Ryan Tannehill just needs to play better.
I mean, he was no Ryan Tannehill last year. We'll leave it at that. The AFC West, there was a lot that happened in the AFC West this offseason. We'll kick it off with the Denver Broncos. They traded for Russell Wilson. They traded away Noah Fant. With Melvin Gordon presumably gone, though that hasn't been completely ruled out, what is the biggest need for the Broncos entering the draft with all of these offensive weapons? Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Albert Okwuegbunam.
Nice.
I think I got it. Javonte Williams, you mentioned earlier. Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler. Like, it seems like the receiving core is pretty set.
I think this is a complete team. I remember saying going into last season that the Denver Broncos are a Super Bowl team, if not for their lack of a quarterback. Well, they addressed that. They fixed that. Is Russell Wilson declining? Maybe. I don't think so. I think he can still be a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. I know that he played poorly overall last season, but I'm willing to chalk that up to, again, poor coaching and the finger injury, because most of his struggles came after he returned from that finger injury. So if Russell Wilson can return to the guy that he was for the past decade, then this team has all the pieces it needs to make a Super Bowl run.
All right, Kansas City Chiefs, they traded away Tyreek Hill. They signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster. They need an alpha wide receiver. They need wide receiver depth. The reality is Mecole Hardman has been perhaps one of the biggest wide receiver flops we've seen. Probably because we expected so much from this offense. Like, we weren't expecting as much from Henry Ruggs. We weren't expecting as much from Jalen Reagor. Although, like, it would have been nice if they hit. Like, there was just something tantalizing about Mecole Hardman. And I feel more let down. So how are the Chiefs going to address the loss of Tyreek Hill outside from what they've done already?
I would assume it would be in the draft, because there's no one left that they can sign that would even attempt to approach Tyreek Hill levels. The MVS signing, I get why they did it, but I just don't think he's very good. I think he is what he's been. I mean, I don't know why we would expect anything different from him. He already has played with one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time. He spent 2 back-to-back seasons.
The best quarterback of all time.
Oh, all right,
You
all right.
see the
That's just fine.
the cheese head. Let me move out of the way. There's the cheese head for you.
Yeah. I should have
You
deduced that. I should have made that joke in advance. That's on me.
you walked into that. You walked into that. It's okay.
I did. But,
Des did not catch it, by the way. Um,
all right. Well, that's an argument for another time. But
I just wanted to poke the cats here. Poke the cats.
appreciate that. We're just having fun here. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Back-to-back MVPs. MVS's best season with Rodgers was 33 catches for 690 yards. He did lead the league in yards per reception that season, but what exactly are we going to do? I mean, we know that targets are a skill statistic. Players command targets because they're good at football. MVS, in 3 seasons where he played 16 games, I know last season there was only 11, but in the 3 full seasons he played, he commanded 73 targets. That was his best. Last season, yes, he had 55 targets in 11 games, a much higher target share than he had previous years. But again, what was that gonna end up being if he played a full season? Maybe he would have gotten to 80 or 90 targets. The Chiefs are looking to replace 160? It's not happening. And I don't like this for Juju Smith-Schuster either, because I liked him more when they still had Tyreek Hill. I like Juju in that complementary wide receiver 2 role. He's not a wide receiver 1. He's proven that he can't be, but he can be a very, very capable wide receiver 2. They need to get him an alpha wide receiver 1 in this draft.
I wouldn't be surprised if they double tapped wide receiver at the back end of the first round. Also, because we saw Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson sign elsewhere. So even the backup pieces are gone. Like, you think are you replacing starters or are you replacing backups? So I think that it's a tremendous priority for the Chiefs going into the draft. The Raiders, they traded for Devontae Adams, which was a big need. They've been hungry for this number 1 wide receiver for years. They traded for Antonio Brown years ago. They drafted Henry Ruggs, and now it's now neither of those are on the team. They signed Demarcus Robinson as well. I'm not convinced, though, that Hunter Renfrow is like the wide receiver 2. Like, he's not a prototypical wide receiver 2. I feel like him being a slot player is like his spot, being the wide receiver 3 on this team, and it was more so a necessity.
Hunter Renfrow last season ran 64% of his routes out of the slot. He's going to play that role again. And we saw that there were some games where he actually was just coming off the field, typically in 2 receiver sets. His snap share, especially toward the end of the season, it was dipping a little bit. He had a couple games where he played around 90% of the snaps, but for the most part, he was looking at a snap share more in the 60 to 65% range. I think in the season it was 66%, according to Player Profiler. That's the role he's going to play again. And I'm worried about him because Devontae Adams is going to eat up all those underneath targets. He is Hunter Renfrow, and he's also that alpha wide receiver 1. He does it all. I mean, I'm sure that you're thrilled about him not being on your team anymore.
Yeah, no.
It
makes me so sad.
And there's still Darren Waller. And so these targets for Adams have to come from somewhere.
They do.
I think it might be Renfrow.
Yeah, they very well may be. I also think that the Raiders aren't done addressing the wide receiver position. We saw them flop on Bryan Edwards. They flopped on Lynn Bowden, both 3rd round wide receiver picks. They've been trying to address it and it just hasn't worked. So I could see them trying yet again in the draft here. The LA Chargers really didn't do much other than re-sign Mike Williams. So we'll move on to the NFC East unless you want to dwell more on the Chargers.
I think the Chargers are pretty good where they are. Not too much to say about where they're at.
Yeah, maybe a running back, but other than that, a replacement for Justin Jackson. The NFC East, the Cowboys had a lot of movement. They traded away Amari Cooper. They re-signed Michael Gallup. They signed James Washington. Like, should we be concerned about running back depth? Zeke's getting older. Tony Pollard is on his last year of his deal. He's not a young pup anymore. Is running back on the radar for the Dallas Cowboys?
I'm worried about the Cowboys having a bit of a letdown season with all their losses. I think that their real issue for them is it's time to rebuild that offensive line. They drafted, I think it went Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, that core, those 3 consecutive years back in the early 2010s. And they lived off that for the better part of a decade. And Frederick retired. Tyron Smith struggles to stay healthy now. Zach Martin still obviously excellent, but they need to rebuild that line. They tried to do it with guys like La'el Collins, but he's gone now too. They also lost Randy Gregory to free agency in a weird type of sign thing where he didn't like the clause that they had, and it was an unfortunate situation on both sides. But yeah, they have more needs than they did at this point last year. I don't think running back is a priority, but then again, this is a team that drafted Ezekiel Elliott over Jalen Ramsey, which I'm still upset about. So my confidence level in this team doing the right thing is not supported by the record.
Well, another team that's not supported by the record is the New York Giants. They signed
Tyrod Taylor.
Well, they signed Tyrod Taylor, but it's Ricky Seals-Jones, RSJ. That's why, as a replacement for Evan Ingram. So I think starting tight end is a need for the Giants, and running back depth. They lost Devontae Booker behind Saquon Barkley, and Booker had the same amount of rushing yards last year as Saquon. Saquon just hasn't looked the same since the ACL tear. We could say there were flashes last year, but I'm not confident that the Giants are confident in Saquon Barkley handling a full load moving forward.
I mean, the numbers support my statement that Devontae Booker was a better running back than Saquon Barkley last season. Now, I'm not saying that Devontae Booker is more talented than Saquon Barkley or ever was, but I really think that the injuries have sapped Barkley's explosiveness. Will it come back? I don't know, but I'm very concerned. At the same time, running back is not the priority for this team. Yeah, they need a backup, but they need a quarterback. That's what they really need. Oof. Daniel Jones is not the answer. Daniel Jones is not a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's a high-end backup. His career path should look like Geno Smith, for example. That's what I would compare Daniel Jones to in terms of what we should see from him. Or maybe he can be the guy that he's a backup. He gets a spot start here and there. Maybe gets a starting job as a bridge quarterback. Goes back to being a backup. That kind of role. That's what he is. They need. Do they need a wide receiver? Is Kadarius Toney ever going to be healthy? I know saying this after one season may seem ridiculous, but this is a guy who missed games with 4 separate injuries as a rookie.
Well, that actually makes me feel better that they're not like recurring injuries. It's not like he tore his hamstring, then he tore his hamstring again, then he strained his hamstring, and then it tore it. I actually feel better about all the different injuries because I feel it's more fluky. I get it that he's a player who has agility. I actually wrote a little blurb, I think, in an article that's going to be coming out here shortly. But I drafted Kadarius Toney in a best ball league a few weeks ago, and he was wide receiver 7 in target rate as a rookie. Like, of all wide receivers, he was wide receiver 7. Sterling Shepard has an Achilles injury from week 15 that he's recovering from, and Toney was the wide receiver 1 overall in juke rate and wide receiver 19 in target separation. 4 of his 7 games where he played at least 40% of snaps, he had 9 targets. So if he's on the field, look out. Like, he's a best ball candidate, I think, to step into that the sneaky high Sterling Shepard role that we had seen for years. But, the question is, can he stay healthy? For those agile players, sometimes you take awkward hits, and that's why it's kind of fluky from time to time.
I actually do like Kadarius Toney, but is he a true wide receiver 1? And do the Giants have that? Because are we sure?
Kenny Golladay is not a wide receiver 1.
Exactly. Thank you. I was going to say, are we sure Kenny Golladay is actually that good? I mean, it was a 3rd round pick, a late 3rd round pick. He entered the NFL at age 24, and what has he had? He's had one good season in 2019. He averaged 15.5 points per game. Other than that, what's he been? He's been a wide receiver 2-3 in 2 other seasons, and then last year he was completely fantasy irrelevant. He should have been on waivers the entire season. And he didn't score a touchdown. Are you kidding me? They had that one game where they went out of their way to pepper him with red zone targets and get him a touchdown. He still couldn't score. At some point, you got to stop blaming the team and start blaming the player.
Or we give credit to Matthew Stafford.
I mean, Matthew Stafford he reminds me of one of my all-time favorite quarterbacks, Tony Romo, in that these guys were always so much better than they got credit for because they just couldn't win in the playoffs. Now, unfortunately for Romo, he never really got that chance to have that run, but Stafford got it and was able to prove everyone wrong last year. Stafford was always better than he got credit for. And you know what? There's something to be said about the guy who supported the two greatest single seasons in wide receiver history.
Hall of Famer Calvin Johnson, future Hall of Famer Matthew Stafford. We'll move on to the Philadelphia Eagles. They extended Dallas Goedert before the season ended. They signed Zach Pascal, the ever sneaky wide receiver from Indy. They re-signed Boston Scott recently. I think the biggest need for the Philadelphia Eagles is that number 2 or number 3 wide receiver role. Not sure who's going to fill it. We had heard that they were tied to Calvin Ridley and making offers for him before the suspension notice. So I wonder if the Eagles are also in the business of wide receiver in this draft.
It is interesting that you mentioned before also that so many teams need a wide receiver. And I think it's good, though, that we have a deep class. Is Devonta Smith a true wide receiver 1? I don't think so, but I think he's a very good wide receiver.
Maybe. I'm not convinced one way or the other.
Neither am I. But he did have a good rookie year. So we can't really dismiss that. He had 64 catches, 916 receiving yards. That's an excellent rookie year. And we've seen players like in the past, like DeAndre Hopkins, for example, have a rookie year that wasn't even as good. And then he emerged into a fantastic player as we've seen over the past decade. So Devonta Smith can easily build on that and become like a 1,300 yard receiver. It's certainly in the range of outcomes. I think he's going to be more of a receptions guy that possibly, I don't want to compare him to like Jarvis Landry because he's certainly like more athletic, but he could be looking at that guy who has that 100 receptions for like maybe only 1,000 or 1,100 yards, which would still be very productive in PPR leagues. But yeah, they definitely need a wide receiver too. I tell you who it's not. It's not Jalen Reagor. That's for sure.
Oh. Nope. It was Travis Fulgham for a hot second, but he's now the 6th wide receiver on Denver. So there
I'm
you
amazed
go.
On the NFL. So good for him.
Washington Commanders traded for Carson Wentz and were able to somehow re-sign J.D. McKissick. Logan Thomas had a mid-season ACL tear. He's also 30 years old. I wonder if the tight end position might be addressed and also the wide receiver 2 or 3 position addressed behind Terry McLaurin. I think a lot depends on how the Washington Commanders view the investment of Curtis Samuel. If they think that he is going to be healthy, if they think that he's going to be able to make a difference this year, unlike last year where it was just nagging injury after nagging injury, then maybe they lower that priority. But they tried to address it last year with De'Ami Brown. He flopped rookie year. So I think that wide receiver, once again, is a priority for them, but also receiving tight end. I could see them going after a tight end here.
Yeah, on the tight end front, Logan Thomas coming off the late season ACL tear. I like Logan Thomas. I think he can still be their tight end of the future, but we don't know how healthy he'll be. If he can't return for week 1, that may be a need. But I think you're right. I think you nailed it with the wide receiver position. It depends on Curtis Samuel. He's still just 26 years old. Which is incredible to me. He's entering his 6th NFL season, and he was productive. I mean, he had a 1,000-yard season in 2020 with Carolina. We're including rushing in that, but I mean that counts. He's an explosive player, but he couldn't stay on the field last season. That hamstring injury, the groin injury, it was a whole host of things that he just couldn't get past. Hopefully now, full off season to recover, he can be that guy. He can be a wide receiver too. He can, but they definitely need to find something. Last year, 154 targets went to the combination of Adam Humphries, DeAndre Carter, De'Ami Brown, and Cam Sims. And of those guys, I think that only one of them really belongs in the NFL, and it's Adam Humphries. So they need a non-Terry McLaurin receiver to have more than 62 targets.
Well, I'm going to pull it up now, but there was a report that came out today, a few hours ago, that had me a little concerned. I think it was from Ian Rappaport. Let me pull up the note here. And it was not about the Washington football teams like holding $5 million from season ticket holders. It was about the running back position and how the Washington football team had brought in or is planning to bring in some of the big time rookie running backs. Washington hosted Texas A&M Isaiah Spiller. The Commanders have hosted already Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker as top 30 visits as well. I'm concerned about Antonio Gibson's role given this news. This is not just rumblings. They're actually hosting these running backs and they signed McKissick. Is Antonio Gibson a sell right now?
Man, this upsets me so much because I like Antonio Gibson, but we really can't deny that Antonio Gibson has been heavily impacted by J.D. McKissick. I think he averaged something like an extra 2 or 3 targets per game with without McKissick in the lineup. But it seems that the Commanders don't want to give Gibson this 3-down role that we know he can play if he was given the opportunity, and that matters, especially for fantasy. And the fact that they were so eager to re-sign McKissick, especially after he initially had gone to Buffalo, and the fact that they're looking into rookie running backs, if they do draft a running back, honestly, at all, I don't even care if it's on day 3. If they draft anyone, that'll be a red flag for Gibson, because they also drafted Jared Patterson. This Gibson, McKissick, and Patterson is perfectly fine for them to move forward with. There's no reason they should even be looking at running backs. So the fact that they are at all definitely is a red flag.
Okay. You heard it here. Sell Antonio Gibson in your dynasty leagues.
All right. I won't go that far
yet. All right. Chicago Bears. We're going to keep moving pretty quickly here. Actually, I won't, because I want to read the Bears roster because okay. Justin Fields, Trevor Siemian, Nick Foles, Ryan Willis, Khalil Herbert, David Montgomery, Darrington Evans, Kahari Blasingame, Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, Equanimous St. Brown, Jesper Horsted, Nasimba Webster, Isaiah Coulter, Daz Newsome, and Cole Kmet. That's what you call a Bear roster.
You are really relishing in this as a Packers fan, aren't you?
It's a disaster. It's an absolutely freaking disaster, Katz. They need wide receiver 2. They need wide receiver 3. Heck, they need a wide receiver 1, so Darnell Mooney's not the wide receiver 1 on this team. The reality is the Bears have so much need on this roster. Like, it drops down significantly. Byron Pringle's your wide receiver 2. Get out of here.
I mean, their second highest target leader last year, 18% target share, was Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's a fine player. He does not need an 18% target share.
Cole Kmet is my sleeper pick to be the tight end 6.
Wow.
Because of those targets. Who else are they going to throw to, Katz?
I guess Byron Pringle. I mean, it's not Equanimous St. Brown, because if they throw to him, he won't catch it.
Oh, ouch. Oof. Cole Kmet right now is going as the tight end 16 on Underdog Fantasy. I think extremely undervalued for what the roster, like, I don't see how the Bears can make that significant of improvement from now until September.
I mean, they're putting a lot of the blame on Matt Nagy, but the reality is you need good players, and they need more of them.
Okay. The Detroit Lions, they signed DJ Chark, but they've got a lot of good pieces. They saw Amon-Ra St. Brown step up last year. Jared Goff, you know what you're going to get with Jared Goff. They need to upgrade him, but I don't think that this is the draft class to be able to do so in. They need an alpha wide receiver as well, which is why I'm pegging them to take Drake London somewhere in the first round. Maybe if he falls the second round, but I think a first round wide receiver is on the docket for the Lions in this draft.
We may very well be talking about the Lions the same way that, like, we were talking about the Broncos before the 2021 season, which is that they have all the pieces in place for a Super Bowl run, and they can just get the quarterback beginning in 2023. Goff is fine. He's a low-end starter, high-end backup type career. That's his trajectory. If they can draft that wide receiver 1, put Chark opposite him. Chark is better cast as a Z receiver, that stretched downfield threat, and then St. Brown in the slot. That is a very, very good receiving trio. They have the running back in DeAndre Swift. I don't know if they want to make him a feature back, but they could still maybe draft an early down like grinder type.
He doesn't need to be a feature back to still be a top 5 fantasy PPR back.
No, they just need to be a better offense, really, or worse, and just pepper him with targets. That works too. And then if they already have a good offensive line, so they're closer than people think to contending.
They're really close. I think it's possible that next year, if Aaron Rodgers takes a step back after 2022, the reality is the Lions, I think, are in the best shot to win the division in 2023 and 2024 beyond.
I don't think that's that ridiculous of a statement.
Okay, now to my Packers. They extended Aaron Rodgers and they re-signed Robert Tonyan, but they trade away Devontae Adams. We'll leave it at that. I don't even know.
Is that a good
They're not even going to draft a damn wide receiver in the first round. And they have 2 first-round picks. They're not going to draft a wide receiver. I just feel so hurt. I
mean, you say they have 2 first-round picks, but does that matter? I mean, they had a first-round pick and a second-round pick, and they spent it on Jordan Love and A.J. Dillon. Now, I like A.J. Dillon, but did either of those players help this team win?
Nope.
When Rodgers is out there and Devontae Adams is covered, which is rare, but he is occasionally, and he's looking, he's like, I got Alan Lazard. Oh, then I got Equanimeous St. Brown. I got someone named Juwan Winfrey. What are we doing here? This is one of the best quarterbacks of all time, still playing at an elite level, and we're doing nothing to help him win now.
What? Oh, they drafted Amari Rodgers in 3rd round at least last year. The
Amari Rodgers isn't good. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say it bluntly. He had where his stats last year. I can't find them.
Because he was
4 passes.
He was a blocking, undersized special team wide receiver. Like, he's literally the opposite of what they needed last year in the 3rd round. Okay. I feel hurt. I don't believe, the Packers need to draft a wide receiver in round 1 and maybe again in round 2, or maybe double tap it in round 1. But I'm not confident that they will. I've just been hurt too much. I'm ready to be hurt again. Okay. All right. The Vikings, they didn't have any major signings or losses. Maybe the running back depth with the questions about the Dalvin Cook domestic violence issue that happened in the middle of November last year. I'm also not confident about Irv Smith and his recovery from injury. We haven't heard a lot of good things, so they may address the tight end and running back position, but there hasn't been a lot of movement for the Vikings.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to discuss there. They're pretty much the same team that they've been. Their offense is going to run through Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook.
Well, the Atlanta Falcons are they're dusty right now because they need a lot of things, and they signed a lot of old dusty players: Damian Williams, Auden Tate, Carterell Hodge. Marcus Mariota is going to be the starter after trading Matt Ryan to the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Ferkser just signed today as the backup tight end, which is fine. They re-signed Cordarrelle Patterson, but they need a wide receiver 1. They need a wide receiver 2. They need a wide receiver 3. They need a young running back because all 3 of their running backs are old, dusty pass catchers: Damian Williams, Mike Davis, and Cordarrelle Patterson. And they need to upgrade their quarterback over Marcus Mariota, which, as we've been harping on in this podcast, many teams aren't going to be able to really upgrade the quarterback position in this rookie draft.
I mean, you mentioned before that we're trying to move a little faster here. Maybe it would have been quicker to talk about what the Falcons don't need as opposed to what they do need, because they pretty much need everything.
Well, then on that note, we'll move to the Carolina Panthers. They signed Donta Foreman and they re-signed Ian Thomas. But behind DJ Moore, they need a little bit more reassurance. Robbie Anderson didn't play well. Terrace Marshall flopped as a rookie. He face planted really hard. And Sam Darnold, the Panthers have been very vocal this offseason about Sam Darnold not being the answer at quarterback. Do you have any insights into the future at the quarterback position for the Panthers?
Well, I know it's not Sam Darnold. I'm certain of that. I mean, I was certain of that before last season because I watched him play for the Jets. And I know that people wanted to make excuses and blame Adam Gase, but Adam Gase can't make his players good at football. And Sam Darnold, the reality is he was never a good prospect. I'm sorry, he just wasn't. And he was always overrated, and he didn't play well with the Jets. And he played well for 3 games with the Panthers, and then we went back to being Sam Darnold. They need a quarterback. They need a wide receiver 2. They probably need a wide receiver 3, because I'm sorry, but Terrace Marshall, 17 catches, 138 yards in 13 games as a rookie. He was a healthy scratch by the end of the season. Nope, it's over. I mean, you can leave him on the back of your dynasty rosters if you want. The reality is, if you can get a 3rd-round pick for him, just do it. You know why? You can throw a dart at somebody else, because we already know Terrace Marshall is probably not going to ever matter.
When you're starting Brandon Zylstra over Terrace Marshall, that's when you know you're in a lot of trouble. The New Orleans Saints re-signed Traquan Smith, but that was pretty much the only upgrade. They re-signed, I wouldn't even call him an upgrade. They re-signed Jameis Winston, but they've been tied to Desmond Ridder. They've been tied to moving up to select Malik Willis. They do feel like they need to address the quarterback position, but sneakily they need to address the running back position, because Alvin Kamara has an even worse legal situation. It's within the range of outcomes that if news comes out and the jury finds him guilty, that Alvin Kamara could spend 4 to 6 years in prison for what happened in Vegas. Like, it's still on the table. And so the running back 2 behind Kamara right now is Mark Ingram and Tony Jones, both on the roster. It's not pretty. So the running back position is extremely fragile right now in New Orleans. I think that needs to be a priority.
It's tricky, because they were really, really close to making the playoffs last season. I mean, it was 1 game away. Yet it feels like they need so much. I wonder, like, how much of that was Sean Payton just finding a way, similar to how Mike Tomlin's done it in the past. And now
they shut out the Bucs, right?
Yeah, they shut out the Bucs. They beat the Bucs twice, I think, last season. I mean, that's impressive. And they did it once with Trevor Siemian. Is Jameis Winston the long-term answer at quarterback? Probably not. It depends, though, because the problem is, what do you do? If you let Jameis sling it, we know he could be a prolific producer, but he's going to throw the ball to the wrong team. Or do you do what he did last year and not let him throw it all? You can't win that way. So they know that, I think, which is why they're looking for.
They also don't have the wide receiver personnel to be able to support that. Like in Tampa, they had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
Yeah, what do you do here? You have Michael Thomas, who's I think he's so pretty good, but he's coming off a complete lost season. He didn't play last year. He's 29 years old now,
and he missed half of the season before.
Right, you missed half the season, so he really hasn't played at a high level since 2019. It's been 2 seasons, and now he's 29 years old. So if this isn't the year, so what? Next year you start to rebuild it. He's 30 years old. Then maybe you're starting to get better by 2024, and now he's 31. All of a sudden, now you need all the wide receivers. At that point, Kamara's going to be 29. He's closer to the end than the beginning. There's a lot of problems in New Orleans right now, and I don't know how aware of it like they may be.
They are completely oblivious. You want to know why? They traded their 2023 first-round pick last week.
That's a very good point.
They have no freaking clue that they are that bad for next year and following. That pick could be a top 5 pick.
And that could be probably will be a far better quarterback class than this one.
All right, we'll move on to Tampa Bay. We're almost done here. Thanks everyone for sticking around with us. We're in the last 5 teams, finishing up the NFC South, and then we've got the NFC West. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they made my favorite offseason move by signing Russell Gage. Russell Gage, I've been a Russell Gage truther for years. He had a huge breakout last year, just hitting time and again in place of Calvin Ridley. And you know what? Chris Godwin's probably going to be missing a significant amount of the start of the season. And Russell Gage, like, even when Godwin and Evans were on the field, Antonio Brown played really well. And I'm not saying that Russell Gage has the same amount of athletic skill that Antonio Brown does, but he played really well last year for an Atlanta team that needed playmakers, and Gage did step up when he was on the field. So I think that was perhaps my favorite free agent signing. And then of course the Bucs re-signed Leonard Fournette and Tom Brady unretired, all of those things. What are the biggest needs for the Bucs going into the draft?
They solved their biggest need when Tom Brady came back, because he fixed their their quarterback situation, which obviously would have been a disaster without Brady unless they signed like some sort of veteran, and their running back situation because Fournette was gone. He was not coming back. And then when Brady resigned, he's like, all right, this is fun. We'll do this again. I can be a 3-down back. So they fixed that. Maybe they need a tight end if Gronk doesn't come back. And I kind of think he's leaning toward retiring. Maybe Tom can talk him into one more season. But either way, they can get by with Cameron Brate. And is OJ Howard still there? I don't even know.
He's in Buffalo, but yeah, no.
There you go.
I would agree that tight end is going to be a need for the Buccaneers if Gronk does not return. Wide receiver 3. We saw Mike Evans have a career low 16.7% target share, and yet still was a top 12 PPR wide receiver in fantasy points per game. Actually, total fantasy points. He was a top 12 wide receiver. I think that there's space for Russell Gage, but there's also, who's going to fill in that wide receiver 3 role behind Evans and Gage while Godwin is out? I think that's a big question.
Yeah, they had that issue last year where they had the game where I think both Evans and Godwin went down. And who was Brady?
Tyler Johnson,
Jalen
Darden,
Brashad Perriman. We saw Brady have to throw to these guys. Even when Fournette wasn't there too. And like Keyshawn Vaughn is a pass catcher, not the best. Ronald Jones, obviously not good. And Brady is just as good as Brady is. He still needs like NFL caliber starters. We almost saw a similar scenario with like the Rams in the Super Bowl after Beckham went down and Higbee wasn't there. Outside of Kupp, he had guys that shouldn't be on the field.
Skoranek shouldn't be running routes in the Super Bowl.
No, he's there to block. So yeah, Brady definitely needs a wide receiver 3, at least for the time that Godwin is recovering. I think he's gonna start the season on the PUP list.
All right, we'll finish out the NFC West. Katz, thanks so much for sticking around with me on the podcast. This has been a lot of fun bantering about each of the teams in brevity. The Cardinals re-signed James Conner and Zach Ertz, and they caused a lot of drama with Kyler Murray. The reality is, though, is they need wide receiver help. As funny as it sounded, last year, their wide receiver room seemed one of the strongest with Christian Kirk still there and AJ Green still there, but both of those players are presumably gone, and now it's Rondell Moore, who's missed a lot of time due to injuries over the last 3 years, 2 at Purdue, and then now in the NFL. And then we saw Chase Edmonds, who we mentioned earlier, be a priority signing by the Miami Dolphins. Is it going to be Eno Benjamin? Is it going to be a free agent, Darrell Williams, or is it going to be a rookie that steps into that running back 2 role?
It's either going to be Darrell Williams or rookie. It's not going to be Eno Benjamin. I mean, I know that so many the analysts out there, the analytics people like Eno Benjamin, but let's just call a spade a spade. He's a 7th round pick, and he had an opportunity. There was a situation where Connor and Evans went down. There was a scenario where he was the presumptive RB1 on the roster for a time period, and he didn't do anything. They didn't give him the ball. It's never going to happen for Eno Benjamin. They're either going to draft somebody else. They'll draft that satellite back to replace Edmonds because. I said I was wrong about Connor last year. I will eat that. But at the same time, the minute Connor got a feature role again, what happened? He sprained his ankle. This is someone that just has proven he can't hold up over a 17-game season. Certainly not with the volume he was getting last year. They definitely need someone to ease the burden a bit on him, and they need a wide receiver too. Rondell Moore is probably best used in the slot. I know he played outside in college, but he's more of a slot guy.
He's 5'7", like 160. 5'7".
We've also never seen a 5'7" receiver be productive in the NFL. So there's that. And DeAndre Hopkins, I'm actually buying a bit of a bounce back for him. But the reality is he's 30 years old. And he's always had like nagging injuries, but he played through this. And well, when you turn 30,
he's not.
That gets a little more difficult. and if he can't stay on the field, I think if he's on the field, he's still DeAndre Hopkins. But if he can't play through those injuries or avoid them, then who is Kyler Murray throwing to? Because he doesn't even have Christian Kirk and AJ Green this year, like you said.
I mean, Zach Ertz is going to get a 40% target share.
He might.
All right, we'll move to the Los Angeles Rams. Running back depth, I think, is a question because Cam Akers, while he came back quickly, did not look like himself a lot. There were a couple moments where we were like, oh, this is kind of Cam Akers, but it seemed like he was moving pretty slow against the Bucks and in the Super Bowl. They signed Allen Robinson. They traded away Robert Woods. I feel like that's an upgrade despite how bad Allen Robinson was last year. He was objectively bad, not just hurt, not just sick, but he did not play well. I could see a high ceiling for him, but there's a legitimate floor that I'm scared of for Allen Robinson.
I think that's a very fair assessment. I know we want to blame Matt Nagy and maybe Justin Fields, but the reality is Darnell Mooney produced. And we're led to believe that Allen Robinson is a much better wide receiver than Darnell Mooney. So why was Mooney able to command targets and produce when Robinson wasn't? And there's got to be something that's on the player. I do think that Matthew Stafford should be able to help revive Robinson's career. But like we saw in the Super Bowl, they need to have that wide receiver depth. Obviously, Kupp is one of the best receivers in the NFL. They'll line up Robinson outside on the opposite him. Will they bring back Odell Beckham? Even if they do, he's missing half the season. That's a certainty. Van Jefferson's he's a fine wide receiver 3. He can get that done. But I really think they still may need another capable depth piece, especially if Robinson is in fact just done. I mean, it's in the range of outcomes. I don't think it's likely, but it's in the range of outcomes. So we'll see what they do there. Again, if they draft someone, do we care? I mean, they just spent the second round pick on Tutu Atwell. Why?
Because his name is really cool.
He does have a cool name.
The San Francisco 49ers didn't do much this offseason. They signed Ray McLeod, slot receiver from Pittsburgh, but we're just waiting for the 49ers to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that's what everyone's waiting for. In fact, we're seeing one fancy Twitter artist do a depiction of Jimmy Garoppolo every day until he is traded. So check that out on Twitter. You can find or search it. That's the update I want to provide on the 49ers, unless, Katz, you want to add anything.
I've got nothing on the 49ers. They need to trade Jimmy Garoppolo and get something for him, but I don't know if there's that many suitors out there right now.
I also don't think they're going to sign Debo to an extension until they trade away Jimmy Garoppolo.
That makes sense.
Okay. Seattle Seahawks, they trade away Russell Wilson. They re-signed Rashad Penny. They traded for Noah Fant. They've got an interesting pass catching core now. They re-signed Will Dissly to like a 3-year, $21 million deal. Whoever is Will Dissly's agent, Katz, if you have that number, like get me in line with that, because I want to find a way to make the deals that Will Dissly's agent, Jimmy Graham from a few years ago, his agent, these veteran tight end agents are really on the spot. I bet you they're the same person. I haven't looked it up, but that's the type of thing that I want to get in on is not doing much and getting paid a ton. So they need help at quarterback. They need help at wide receiver 3. Dwayne Eskridge isn't the answer. And there are questions about the health of the running backs. Chris Carson coming off the neck injury and Rashad Penny's seemingly annual stint on the IR. Just it's an eyebrow raise. So what can the Seattle Seahawks do to get themselves into playoff contention?
We'll go a route we haven't gone for the other 31 teams. What they need to do first and foremost is have a really, really bad season and fire their coach. The only reason that the Seahawks have not won or reached another Super Bowl since their last loss to the Patriots is because Pete Carroll he's so bad. He has this offense stuck in 1970. He's restrained Russell Wilson. And he is the reason. I know that we don't want to focus too much on coaches, but coaches can certainly ruin a team more than they necessarily can benefit a team if the players aren't good. The players in the Seahawks have been good. Why haven't they won? Because Pete Carroll refuses to let their quarterback throw the ball. Now he has one that can't. So maybe they'll just run the ball. Rashad Penny, hopefully he can stay healthy, because I thought he looked really good down the stretch last season, but he has yet to prove he can. Chris Carson, not sure if he ever plays again. I really don't know. I mean, for his
saying he's recovering well, and some of the beat reporters about a month ago were saying that he would be the running back one, although those comments have been backtracked in the last couple weeks. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. I hope it's Penny, because Penny's better than Carson. But again, both of them injury risks. They need a running back. They need a coach. They need a quarterback. I mean, they've got the 2 receivers, so that's good. But they're pretty far away from contending, so they got some work to do.
For perspective, the Seahawks ran the amount of plays in 17 games that you would expect teams to play a run in 16 games. They lost about a full game's worth of plays over the course of the season.
That doesn't surprise me at all. That's a really good stat you pulled up there, and it just it speaks to the type of offense that Pete Carroll's been running. He's been doing this for almost a decade now, and it's time that they moved on from Russell Wilson. Obviously, it's time to just reset everything, and they really should trade Tyler Lockett too, because he's gonna be 30 years old. Rebuild around Metcalf, get yourself an elite offensive line, and find a quarterback in maybe the 2023 or 2024 draft.
All right, Katz, I think we've reached the end. We've done an awesome job going through it. It's been great spending time with you. What plugs do you have? You're at PFN. We can follow you at Jason Katz 13 at PFN 365. Where can we find some more of your work and follow you?
Well, I'm only at PFN now. I'm there full time, so that's the only place that you'll catch any of my content. And there's some other great writers at PFN. They cover all football, NFL, college. Have great draft show coming up for the NFL draft. There'll be content on the website for that. So yeah, just check us out at profootballnetwork.com. There's the premier fantasy football podcast that I do with BJ Riddell. We release that on Mondays and Wednesdays usually. That may change after the draft, probably be a little more frequent. And he does spot shows on that almost every day. And yeah, and then at PFN Fantasy is the Twitter account. And that's where all my stuff is. I had a great time chatting with you. I'd love to do this again in the future.
Awesome. Well, if you haven't downloaded the Underdog Fantasy app, make sure you have. Go to underdogfantasy.com as well. You can use the promo code FFF for 100% first-time deposit match up to $100. On behalf of Katz, I'm Bradley Stalder, FFF Stalder. You've been listening to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast. Thanks, everyone. Good luck in your rookie drafts, your rookie dynasty drafts. I'll be doing some mock drafts here coming up shortly. Good luck, everyone, and we'll see you later.